The preacher claimed she brought death. Yet the mountain man reached for her heart regardless. Silverbrook, Wyoming territory. January 1883, crystalline snow descended upon the weathered timber structures of Silverbrook, shrouding the community's secrets beneath pristine white silence. Within the former schoolhouse that now served as the town's gathering place, flames danced in the iron stove, projecting wavering shadows of assembled citizens across the rough-hewn walls. Preacher Mordecai Grimm stood before the crowd. In a midnight black coat that sparkled with ice crystals, his words rang sharp and clear through the converted space. This evening we cleanse our territory of the malevolence that has plagued us since her mother's blood first stained our earth. He proclaimed, raising a weathered tome with quivering hands. Tonight we banish the sorceress who whispers to the bitter winds. Murmurs rippled through the gathering, some voices trembling with fear, others alive with dark fascination. From the room's edge a fragile voice protested. She remains but a young woman, born of this very land, not some demon. From the depths, the speaker, an elderly Lakota healer with braided silver hair and eyes like morning mist, struggled to stand. Grimm's finger stabbed toward her. Silence that heathen tongue. Two burly men seized her shoulders, forcing her back to her seat. The crowd settled into uneasy quiet. Then came the groan of wooden hinges and the echo of approaching footsteps. Deliberate, uncertain, heavy with accumulated snow. Every head turned toward the warm lamplight as a figure appeared, a woman with bound wrists secured by weathered hemp rope, flanked by armed escorts, Alina Thornfield. The name carried whispered legends and countless warnings. She stood motionless, at the hall's center, appearing carved from winter's heart itself. Her raven hair cascaded over her shoulders, still adorned with fragments of evergreen, skin pale as fresh powder, lips the shade of winter berries, and eyes so profound and still they rendered strong men speechless. No tears fell, no pleas escaped her lips. Preacher Grimm gestured toward her as if unveiling a relic of blasphemy. Behold the ice witch of Thornfield Valley, child of two bloodlines, cursed by their own heritage. Every soul she has embraced has perished. Some through mishap, others by flame, all by her touch. Sharp intakes of breath swept the room. Death flows in her very breath, he continued, bringing destruction to any fool who dares cherish her. The crowd pressed forward eagerly. Let the bidding commence. Elena's gaze swept the room, finding no compassion, no mercy. Not until the schoolhouse door creaked open once more. Another figure entered, tall and snow-covered, a Winchester rifle slung across his broad shoulders. His coat bore countless patches, boots, worn thin by mountain travel. He positioned himself near the back wall, silent, his keen eyes moving. Marcus Steele had ridden into Silverbrook seeking medical supplies and provisions. What he discovered was a young woman wrapped in rumors and ice, a woman who met his gaze and refused to look away. Their eyes locked across the crowded room. He understood grief intimately. His beloved wife and infant son had been stolen from him during a night of violence, 6 winters past. Since then, he had chosen solitude mountains, quiet, the company of wolves. But her eyes held the same expression he saw in his own reflection. Half of something shattered, yet still breathing. The auction began with silence. No soul dared offer currency. Undesired such a curse. $10, someone mocked. Too steep for a walking corpse. Another sneered 5 pennies. A drunk man laughed harshly. Grimm raised his hand. She must be claimed or face execution. No man shall depart this hall until a soul binds itself to hers. Then from the room's rear came a voice, steady, low. Without hesitation, I offer 1 stone. The hall fell silent as death itself. Grimm blinked rapidly. A stone? Marcus stepped forward, drawing from the leather cord around his neck a small silver nugget, polished, smooth, and shaped like a falling tear. I mined it myself, he said. From the cliffs above Eagle's Peak. Grimm's eyes narrowed dangerously. You mock this sacred place. But Marcus remained unmoved. He placed the silver upon the pulpit between them. It represents all I possess, he declared, yet more than anyone else has offered her this night. Alina tilted her head slightly, allowing one dark lock to shift across her cheek. She recognized something in him, something absent from her world for years. A man who rejected the power of curses. Marcus turned toward her, his eyes gentle yet certain. "I will claim her," he said simply. "Whatever she may be." Grimm sputtered, uncertain how to stop a man who felt no fear of damnation. The crowd remained frozen, caught between judgment and wonder. Alina stayed motionless, but in the silence that followed, for the first time in memory, she closed her eyes. When she opened them again, a tempest had awakened behind them, a storm neither of them would ever escape. The wind shrieked like hunting. Wolves as Marcus guided his stallion upward through the snow-swept peaks known as Eagle's Roost. Alina rode behind him, wrists still bound, her silence heavier than the falling snow. They reached his lodge by sunset, a sturdy log structure. Nestled between towering pines and frozen stone, he opened the door without words and motioned for her to enter. She remained outside instead, eyes scanning the tree line, breath forming. Clouds in the frigid air. Marcus didn't argue, cut her bonds, left the rope coiled on the steps, and went inside. He kindled the fire, warmed water, placed a cup on the wooden table, steam rising in lazy spirals. Wild sage floated within it, an offering, not a command. That first night, Alina curled upon the porch, cloak pulled tight around her shoulders. Marcus placed a folded woolen blanket near the threshold and left the door partially open. No questions. No sermons, only space. Days passed in frost and silence. She never fully entered, only sat at the hearth's edge during meals. He never spoke her name, never touched her. Instead, he fashioned a peg for her possessions. Stacked extra kindling by the door, left a tin of dried sage where she could see. Its small gestures, unspoken. One evening, after splitting wood until his muscles ached, Marcus leaned against the cabin wall and allowed his thoughts to drift to a warm, kitchen long-vanished laughter echoing through rooms he could never enter again. His wife Sarah, with flowers in her hair, their boy Thomas, chasing a wooden horse Marcus had carved. He'd only stepped out to mend a gate. He returned to screams, to boots he didn't recognize, to smoke billowing from windows. Drunken raiders. A bottle abandoned, scorch marks on the cradle. The mountains had consumed him since. Now, within his silence, someone else sat beside the same fire. Alina barely moved, her eyes always turning to the window as if watching for something dash someone in her dreams. She heard the snap of bone, the echo of a cry down a canyon wall. Diego's cry at her love, her joy, her destruction. They had planned to flee together, find land, build a life where no one whispered about curses or bloodlines. But Sheriff Hawthorne discovered their plans. Deputy Hawthorne, the one who stalked her like prey, who had warned Diego to stay away. 1 week later, Diego had fallen from a narrow ledge near Cedar Falls, no witnesses. Just a Hada black Stetson Hawthorne signature. No one believed her accusations, not even her own family. Instead, they whispered, she brings death to those she kisses. Since that day, she had kissed no one. The season's first snow came early, a gentle, sorrowful cascade of ash-colored flakes. Blanketing the porch, Marcus stood at the doorway, mug in hand, watching her sleep hunched near the woodpile. He stepped closer, opened the door wider. Warmer inside, he said simply. Nothing more. He returned to his chair and left the door open. Hours passed. Then, just before dawn, he woke to a soft sound, bare feet on wood. Lena stood just inside, arms wrapped around herself, eyes red but defiant. "I cannot stay," she whispered. "But tonight the snow feels like him." Marcus didn't ask who him was. Instead, he poured the last of the sage tea, slid the mug across the table. "You can sit. Just sit." She did. For a long while neither spoke. Then her voice, so quiet it nearly disappeared. He fell, they claimed. The earth took him, but earth never pushes a man in polished boots. Marcus stared into the flames. Lost. Mine 2 men with polished guns. Alina turned toward him then, her expression unguarded for the first time. The snow thickened outside, muffling the world. Inside, Two broken souls sat in silence, neither seeking healing, neither offering salvation, only warmth. That night, when Marcus stepped out for firewood, he found her curled on the porch, tears streaking her face as snow kissed her hair. He didn't speak, didn't need to. He sat beside her, shoulder touching shoulder, and together they listened to the snow mourn what was lost. The wolves appeared after midnight every evening just past, the hour when the fire settled into crimson embers. Their howls curled through the trees like ancient melodies. Initially, Marcus kept his Winchester close, but after a week of watching, waiting, listening, he noticed something peculiar. The wolves never approached closer than the forest edge. They didn't circle the lodge. They didn't threaten the livestock. They only passed through, silent and steady, always pausing by the same boulder just beyond the tree line, then vanishing back into the timber, guarding, not hunting. Alina noticed. As well, she would rise from her corner whenever the howls began and stand barefoot on the porch. Face tilted skyward, eyes closed, perfectly still. Marcus never questioned why. The next time he rode down to Silverbrook for supplies, the whispers had grown louder. They say the lodge is cursed now. Saw shadows walking beside that hunter. Of yours, eyes that weren't human, some of the auction men went up the ridge last week, haven't returned. That final rumor made Marcus pause. He asked no questions, just paid for coffee, ammunition, and salt, then rode home in silence. That night, after Alina had fallen asleep, curled near the hearth, Marcus stood on the porch and stared into the darkness. One of the men who'd bid on her had vanished without trace. Yet never once had he feared for his life, not from her, not from the wolves. He realized slowly that she hadn't only brought the cold with her, she had kept the worst of it at bay. The wolves, the silence, the strange peace that had returned. To his nights, she wasn't the curse, she was the shield. That night he wrapped a small bundle of sage and linen and set it beside her blanket. Alongside it, a scrap of paper with words carved in his rough handwriting. If you wish to remain, do not leave at morning. He slept poorly, but when he opened his eyes at dawn, the fire still crackled, and she remained there. She stood near the cot, folding his spare blanket with slow, practiced care. She didn't speak. Neither did he. He moved to the hearth and stirred the embers back to life. That evening, as wind gathered outside and clouds pressed low against the peaks, Marcus took 2 tin bowls from the shelf and filled them with stew venison, beans, wild onions. He placed one bowl before her seat, then sat across from her. She watched him, then slowly lowered herself to the bench. No words, just the sound of spoons against tin. At one point, she reached for salt. Their fingers brushed. She didn't flinch. Neither did he. They ate in silence, broken only by the fire's whisper. But in that silence lived something no prayer or curse could name, a quiet pact made without ceremony, sealed by the fact that neither had fled. When the meal ended, she stood, gathered the bowls, and washed them in melted snow water. He didn't stop her. That night the wolves howled again, but this time, when Marcus stood on the porch, Alina came beside him and spoke, her voice low. "They are not mine," she said, "but they know who I am." He turned toward her, searching her gaze. "Who is that?" She looked up at the moon, pale against the branches. "Someone who will not run anymore." Their eyes met in the stillness. No smile, no tears of relief, just the soft and certain understanding that something had shifted. It would not shift back. The news reached Preacher Grimm through a breathless stable boy who had seen smoke rising from Eagle's Roost. "Hey, she's still there," the youth stammered. "Alive, living in that hunter's lodge?" Grimm's lips curled, teeth clenched so tightly his jaw cracked. "She was supposed to be gone," he hissed, taken by the cold or the curse. "Instead, she thrives in his eyes, corrupting a man who once kept to himself." "Fetch Hawthorne," Grimm growled. "Tell him to take 3 men and ride at nightfall." Deputy Hawthorne didn't hesitate. He'd waited for this moment. He saddled his horse with quiet precision, eyes gleaming beneath his black hat's brim. When the time came, he rode up the mountain without a word, like a man fulfilling destiny. The snow began again, around dusk thick, wet flakes falling without wind, blanketing the woods in silence, too perfect to trust. He stood outside chopping wood when the first snap of a branch cracked through the stillness. Too sharp, too deliberate. He dropped the axe and turned. 3 shadows emerged from the pines. Then a fourth hawthorn, moving with the slow swagger of someone who believed in ghosts only after killing them. Alina was inside, tending the fire. Marcus shouted a warning. She appeared at the doorway just as the first shot rang out. It struck Marcus in the shoulder, spinning him back against the woodpile. He crumpled, blood seeping into snow. "Marcus," she cried, running to him. But the moment she knelt, 2 men seized her arms. "Stop!" She screamed, struggling. Hawthorne stepped forward, grabbing her chin. "You don't belong here, Alina. You never did." Marcus, groaning through the pain, reached for his rifle, but a boot slammed down on his wrist. "Stay down, Hunter Hawthorne." Spat. "Your part in this ends now." They dragged Alina to her feet, bound her hands with fresh rope. She fought. They didn't care. Then, just before they turned to leave, Alina stopped. She looked at Marcus lying in the snow, teeth gritted against the agony in his shoulder. And she spoke, voice shaking not with fear, but fury. "Do not come for me." His eyes widened, chest heaving. "I am a curse," she whispered, "and if you follow, I will be the one to destroy you." Her voice cracked then, not from truth, but from heartbreak. The wind rose, scattering snow like ash, erasing their footprints as they vanished into the woods. Marcus tried to rise, but pain dragged him down. As darkness closed in, only one thought. Burned through the haze, he would follow, even if it killed him. Marcus woke to the ache of blood-soaked cloth frozen to his skin. He lay in the snow where he had fallen, breath shallow, shoulder burning like fire under ice. Went for a moment the world. Spun gray sky above, crimson snow below. But then her voice returned to him, soft and sharp. "Do not come for me." He rose. He tore a strip of cloth from his shirt and bound his shoulder tight. It was crude, painful, but he could move. He moved because she had lied. If she had wanted him gone, she would not have wept. He followed the trail of broken snow where horses had passed. The tracks grew faint as wind picked up. Soon the storm descended like the sky was trying to bury the earth alive. His breath came in ragged gasps. Trees blurred. His horse had bolted during the ambush, so he walked half stumbling, half crawling. The world narrowed to pain, wind, and her name beating inside his skull. Hours passed, maybe more. By the time he saw Silverbrook's lights glowing through the blizzard, he could barely feel his legs. He reached the schoolhouse by dragging himself along the fence rails inside. Beneath the platform and behind the altar, Alina sat chained to the stone wall of the cellar. Preacher Grimm circled her like a wolf with scripture. "You have deceived the weak-hearted," he spat, "but not the Almighty." Alina said nothing. "You poisoned a man's soul. You made him bleed for your sins." She looked up, eyes hollow. "I made no one bleed." Grimm slammed his hand on the table. "You speak with the devils?" Tongue. Upstairs, the schoolhouse was being prepared. Wood stacked in a circle. Oil barrels opened. Posts driven into the floorboards. The townspeople gathered again, their faces grim with snow and doctrine. Children were sent home. Torches were lit. "She burned before midnight," someone whispered. "She has to," another muttered, "or winter will never end." In the cellar, Hawthorne leaned close to Alina, eyes glinting. "I told you," he said, "you would end up in flames." She turned away. He grabbed her jaw, forcing her to look. "That hunter of yours is probably frozen to death by now." Her lips trembled, but only for a second. Then came a sound. A crash. Wood splintering upstairs. Grimm turned, startled. "Stay here!" he barked at Hawthorne, then climbed the stairs with a rusted revolver in hand. The schoolhouse doors slammed open. Snow swept in like a vengeful spirit, whipping through the benches. Marcus stood there, half covered in frost, coat-torn eyes wild with fury. "Release her," he growled. Grim raised his gun. Before he could fire, Marcus did. One shot, the torch. And Grim's hand flew into the air, struck the wall, and died. The second shot shattered the window above the platform. A gust of snow poured in, extinguishing the fire pit before it could ignite. The townspeople screamed and ducked. Some fled. Marcus stepped forward, blood dripping from his bandaged shoulder. "She is no curse," he shouted. "You are." Hawthorne ran. Up from the cellar, weapon drawn. Marcus turned and fired again, this time into the beam above Hawthorne's head. Would crash down. Hawthorne fell beneath it. Then Marcus descended into the darkness. He found her chained, shivering, eyes wide with something deeper than fear recognition. He knelt beside her, keys trembling in his fingers. She tried to speak, but he shook his head. Later he whispered, "Right now we run." When he unlocked the chains, she collapsed against him. He held her just long enough to remember how warmth felt. Then, through the broken window, they disappeared, two shadows in a snowstorm. Fleeing the fire meant for them, but the only thing that burned that night was the lie. Snow still swirled through. The broken windows of Silverbrook's schoolhouse, painting the benches and platform in ghostly white. Preacher Grim stood at the front, gun trembling in one hand, Bible clutched in the other, torn between judgment and fear. Marcus held Alina close, his body sagging from blood loss and exhaustion, but his voice never wavered. "If she is cursed," he said, "then I will bear it." Grim sneered. "You are a fool." "I was a fool when I let grief silence me for years. I was a coward when I buried myself in snow to forget the ones I lost. But this woman," Marcus turned to look at Alina, who met his gaze with quiet agony. "She brought me back. She taught me to feel again." Hawthorne, covered in dust and ash from the beam collapse, limped forward, revolver in hand, lip curled. As he looked at Alina, "You bewitched him like the others. It's what you do, isn't it? Tear men down one by one." "No," Alina said, her voice cold as the storm outside. "Men like you do that to yourselves." Hawthorne's face darkened. "He'll die." Like the last one, Marcus narrowed his eyes. "What did you just say?" Alina stepped forward slowly, eyes locked on. Hawthorne. The crowd stilled. The wind shrieked through the schoolhouse like an omen. "I never killed Diego," she said. "He died because he loved me, and you hated that." Hawthorne's grip on the gun faltered, his mouth twisted. "You have no proof." I don't need it. You followed us that day," you warned him, then he fell. "There were no witnesses, no one but you. And you left your hat behind. Black felt with a silver band. I found it by the cliff. It was yours." Gasps stirred from the townspeople. Preacher Grim raised his voice. "This is deception, a heathen's lie." But the crowd wavered. An old man near. The front leaned toward his wife. "I remember Hawthorne had a bruise that week. Said he fell off his horse." A woman near the back whispered, "I saw that black hat in his hands the day before the boy died. Never saw it again." Hawthorne's hand shook. "You were never supposed to be anything but a lesson," he snarled at Alina. "No one defies their place." Grim stepped forward, desperation rising. "Silence, all of you. She must burn." He cocked the hammer of his pistol. Both of them. And then from the rear of the schoolhouse, a voice, old, cracked but unshakable, "Let them go." Heads turned. A frail woman stepped forward, wrapped in deerskin and feathers. Her face was lined like river maps, her eyes the color of dusk. "Grandmother Many Spirits," someone whispered. The crowd parted for her. She walked with slow steps to the platform where Grim still held his gun aloft. "You call her a curse?" the grandmother said. "But she is a daughter of the high snows, of my people, of the wind that does not break but bends." Grim snapped, "She brings death." The old woman shook her head. "No, she brings truth." She turned to the villagers. Long before this schoolhouse, long before Grim's fire, there was a girl born in a winter storm. Hair dark as pine, skin pale as morning frost. The wolves sang to her, and the trees bowed when she passed. They said she would bring warmth where men saw only cold. Alina stood frozen, eyes wide. The woman smiled gently at her. She was not cursed. She was protection balance. But when the white men came and conquered, they turned her gift into fear. They killed her name, buried her story, but stories live in blood, and your blood remembers. Murmurs rose. Someone dropped their torch. Grimm shouted, "She will corrupt you all." But the crowd had changed. A man stepped forward, dropping his gun belt. "I've lost 2 winter's crops. Maybe it ain't her we should blame." Mother spoke. "She never hurt nobody." "We did." Grimm raised his pistol toward Alina. Marcus stepped in front of her. "Then shoot me." Alina pushed him aside. "No. If this town wants death, they can take it from me."
Ow.
A voice cried from the crowd. It was the old Lakota healer, now standing tall despite her bruises. "We will not let another fire claim the wrong soul." One by one, the townspeople moved. They stood between Elena and Grimm. He backed away, eyes wild. "You're all damned." Wind howled. The doors slammed open again. Snow swept in like judgment. Grimm ran, and Silverbrook watched him disappear into the storm alone, screaming at shadows. Marcus turned to Alina, his eyes burning not with pain, but awe. "I told you. I'd follow." She touched his face, fingers trembling. "I told you I would destroy you if you did." She smiled barely. But it was the first real smile in years. Preacher Grimm's scream tore through the schoolhouse as he raised his gun for the final time, his bloodshot voice fury itself. "You think you can erase sin with snow and sympathy? She is death." He aimed straight at Marcus. But before he could fire, a young rancher lunged forward, grabbing his arm. The shot rang wild, slamming into the stone arch above the platform. Dust rained down. The crowd surged. Men shouted. Women pulled children behind them. Hawthorne, dazed and bleeding beneath collapsed timber, struggled to rise, but the town's blacksmith and 2 others pinned him down. One man twisted the deputy's arm behind his back with practiced fury. "This is justice," someone muttered. Grimm tried to run, but the townspeople closed in. He clawed at the schoolhouse doors, spitting scripture, but no one listened. He had lost them not to witches, not to wolves, but to truth. "We were wrong," the healer said as she helped Alina to her feet. "We were afraid, and we let that fear poison us." Marcus leaned heavily against the benches, blood seeping through his bandages. But his hand never left Elena's. Outside, the wind softened. Snowflakes fell slower, gentler as if ashamed of their violence. Then something strange happened. Clouds broke, and the sun paled golden. Hesitant split through the gray. The people of Silverbrook turned their faces upward in awe. The snow began to melt, not fast, but surely. Steam rose in thin wisps from the rooftops. Icicles wept. Children peered from doorways, blinking in the sudden light. "It's too early," someone whispered. "Spring never comes this soon." "Maybe it's not the season," said the grandmother. "Maybe it's forgiveness." By dusk, the stake built for Alina had been taken down plank by plank. The oil barrels rolled away. Fire never touched her. Instead, the town elders convened and voted to exile Preacher Grimm from Silverbrook. He was escorted to the town's edge, stripped of title and weapon, given only a horse and a warning: "Do not return." As for Deputy Hawthorne, he was handed over to the territorial marshal for Diego's death and abuse of office, in the fading orange of sunset. The people gathered silently as Alina and Marcus prepared to leave. No one stopped them. No one begged them to stay, but eyes followed them with something near respect, kind of reverence reserved not for saints, but for survivors. Alina walked beside Marcus, his arm around her waist. Their steps were slow, but sure. At the town's edge, where pine met plain, she paused. Snow had melted in patches along the trail. Little green buds peeked through, uncertain but hopeful. She reached for Marcus's hand. Their fingers laced. Number 1 died. No lightning struck. No wind howled. Just the sound of birds, real birds singing in the distance for the first time in months. Marcus looked at her. That quiet strength in his eyes. I guess that means I'm still alive, he murmured. She smiled, and I'm still cursed. Then curse me again. She kissed his knuckles soft, slow, a vow spoken without words. They disappeared into the trees. Behind them, Silverbrook stood quiet, but not the same. Would never be the same again. 1 year later, the lodge on Eagle's Roost no longer resembled a hermit's refuge. Its roof was mended. The porch widened, smoke curling steadily from the chimney like a heartbeat in winter. A carved wooden sign hung above the door, the Steel Lodge Tea, Shelter Stories. Travelers often found their way there, miners. Hunters, lost souls wandering in search of something not found on maps. Each was greeted the same way, with warm, sage tea, a clean blanket, and silence when they needed it most. Alina was the one they came for. She never spoke loudly, never raised her hand in warning or blessing. But when she placed her fingers on a fevered brow or whispered prayers in Lakota, sickness fled and peace remained. Her tea made from sage, mint, and something secret could calm grief. She became known as the breath of the mountain among both white settlers and native folk. When she moved, the wolves watched from the ridge not to threaten, but to witness. Marcus, his shoulder fully healed, spent his days carving toys for the children who passed through. His favorite was the small wooden wolf. He would place one in every child's pocket, saying, "This one howls for you when you're afraid." Some children returned, just to see the man with the quiet eyes and calloused hands who never asked what they had lost. Together they lived like two sides of the same coin, one warm, one cool, spinning endlessly in balance. In early spring, they married not in a church, but beneath a tall pine where snow still clung to the shadows. A Lakota elder draped them in a red woven blanket. Alina wore a white dress stitched with blue cornflowers, her mother's silver earrings dancing in the wind. Marcus stood in a woven sash gifted by a Mexican friend from down south. They exchanged vows in 2 languages and sealed them with hands painted in ochre and ash. Guests came from everywhere: Silverbrook, Lakota settlements, traders, old soldiers, even the blacksmith who had once held Hawthorne down. That night wolves howled not in warning, but in celebration. By autumn, the lodge's garden bloomed with wild herbs. Children giggled as they chased one another beneath falling leaves, clutching their carved wolves. Elena's belly swelled with life. Then, on the first snowfall of the year, with the mountains hushed and white once more, their daughter came into the world. They named her Hope. She had her mother's eyes and her father's steadiness. She cried not with fear, but as if announcing to the mountain that something new had been born, and the wind listened. That night, Marcus stood outside with Hope wrapped in a shawl. Alina leaned on the doorframe, arms folded, watching her family. With a gaze that said more than words ever could, inside the fire crackled. Steam curled from the teapot. 2 wolves sat just beyond the tree line, tails still, eyes glowing.